Hi everybody, welcome along to another short kind of explanation of one of my blog posts. This one looking at making what I suppose you could describe as baby steps to get results. I think quite often when people come to you as a trainer, as a coach, they expect you to make loads of changes and come up with lots of ideas about what they should be doing. But I prefer to almost work in reverse of that. And the way I consider this is, and often it surprises people when I say I've never written a diet plan for a client. And they're like, well, surely as a nutritionist, that's what you do. And actually, the reason I don't write diet plans is I don't think people will stick to them. Because what you're doing with a diet plan is giving a very prescriptive kind of outline of what a person should do. Now, while they're working with you, they'll follow that diet plan. They'll do it rigidly, and if it says this for breakfast, this is a snack, this is lunch, so on and so forth. So a lot of effort would go into devising that anyway. Now what's going to happen over time is, bit by bit, they won't be able to do it. I couldn't make my snacks, or I didn't make that for lunch, or this happened. So the way I like to describe it or think of it is a bit like a pyramid, and this is the way normally diets work. If you think of most diet plans, or if somebody buys the latest diet book or something like that, you read through the book and it tells you to change this, change that shit. So you start off with loads of changes. You're out here with all your changes. Now, what happens over a period of time is you lose some of those changes. So the width of the pyramid, if you like, represents all the changes. And as we move up the pyramid, that represents the time scale. And so what ultimately happens is, with any pyramid, we start wide, but as we move up the pyramid, we slowly get to a point where we hit a point, literally. Now that represents no changes. So we start out with loads of changes, time goes by, life gets in the way, and slowly we slip back into our old routine, dropping one change at a time. So that, in terms of a lifestyle change, obviously is completely detrimental. It also undermines the person's self-efficacy, because they're seeing failures and they keep looking back going, oh, well, I was doing that and I couldn't stick to that. And then I was doing that, but I wasn't able to stick to that. And so they kind of beat themselves up. And this is where you hear people saying, oh, I didn't have the willpower to stick at it or whatever. So that's why I don't like diet plans. And that's why I think everybody should kind of make small changes along the way. And what I want you to think about now is, what we're going to do is, rather than start out with our normal pyramid or triangle, if you want to think of it that way, is we're going to turn it on its head. And we are now going to start at the point, so no changes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of changes. And this is the way I work with clients. And in fact, most of the personal trainers that took part in my doctoral research, this is the way we advise them to work with their clients in terms of getting behaviour change. So they would sit down with the client and say, okay, this is where you're at the moment, and you want to get a bit fitter, lose a bit of weight, reduce your body fat, change your waist measurement, whatever it might be. What ideas have you got for things that maybe you think need changing, need improving? And use the client's knowledge base. They will have a good understanding of healthy eating. It might not be perfect, and there might be things you're going to have to re-educate them about, but generally most people have got a pretty fair idea of what they need to do. And what you're going to do here is, you're just going to get them to select one or two changes. Now that might be nutritional, it might be activity. So they might say, okay, I'm going to walk to work, I'm going to park my car further away. But only one or two. The temptation is to make 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're back to our wide base pyramid and we're going to go in the wrong direction. So you're almost reining them back, because at the start of any program, as I've alluded to in other blogs, people's motivation is always high. They want to make loads of changes. This is really going to work. It's going to be the next best thing. So what we want is just a couple of changes. Now, hopefully what we get after agreeing those couple of changes is the client comes back in a week, 2 weeks time, and they're, oh, I've made those changes. Didn't really notice I was doing them. Actually, it's been fairly straightforward. Now, if you hear that type of language, that's telling you that's a pretty good chance they can stick with that. So that's good. We'll stay with that. And now we're going to build on that success, because the other thing that will have done is, if they've managed to stick with it for a week, 2 weeks, it will actually help their level of self-efficacy, because now they've got a bit of belief, oh, I can do that. Equally, they may come back to you and go, oh, I started out with those changes and it was all right, but then I had a really bad day at work, or the kids played up, or the kids were ill, or whatever it might be, and I really couldn't stick with it. Now, that's not a problem, because that's telling you, okay, that change is not realistic for this individual. If they can't stick at it when they're working with you, there is no way they're going to stick with it once they're kind of out on their own. So that's clearly not a lifestyle change, because their lifestyle got in the way of that change. So in most cases, you would just drop that. Now, it could be that you can work with them to plan around that. So, oh, that particular event happened. How could you have managed that slightly better? So you don't always kind of throw the changes out with the bathwater, because sometimes there may be kind of a way of coping with it better and trying a new strategy. But it is, as I would describe it, it's a case of suck it and see. What works, we're going to stay with. What doesn't, we're going to chuck. And my mantra when working with clients has always been, and I have to get them to buy into this, it's your lifestyle that got you fat, unfit, unwell, whatever it might be. And only changing that lifestyle is going to get you healthy, fit, feeling great about yourself. It needs to be a lifestyle change. And if you're working with a 30, 40-year-old client, you're looking at decades that they've got into those habits. So it's going to take a long way back as well. You can almost think of it using our pyramid analogy again. It's been a long way up one side. We've now got to walk back down the other side. And the best way to do that, come down a mountain, is walk and take small, steady steps. You can jump off the mountain, but that's the equivalent of your fad diet, your quick fix routine. And generally jumping off a mountain tends to injure you and end up with long-term consequences. And it's the same with your fad diets and so on. So it's actually quite a nice analogy that it's taking God up one side, then it's got to be a similar journey back down the other side. And people have to buy into that. And a way of selling that is to talk to them about previous diet experience, what they've tried in the past, how many they've tried in the past. Because if you add up all those attempts, it most probably comes to quite a long time. So you could say to them, if you'd have invested that time in making small changes, we'd be ahead of the curve now. So from here on in, we're going to go with what's going to work long term. You can equally use this analogy in reverse. And what I mean by that is when things go wrong. So the client has a bad day. Now, they might catastrophize that. And I've talked in previous blogs about relapses. Failure can be a kind of learning feedback, and it should be used in that way. But equally, put it into context. A day, when you look at it in terms of a month, it's a very small percentage. You know, it's 3% or something like that. If we extrapolate it to a year, one day going wrong is 0.27%. And if we extrapolate it to a 10-year, then you can see that now the numbers start to go off the scale. So the odd day here or there is human nature that will happen, and look at it in the context of your life, your 10-year plan, if you like. And when you put it into proper context, the odd day is going to happen, and that's real life. So remember, baby steps, move forward, and by making little successful changes, they will grow into a bigger successful outcome. And that's applicable whether we're talking about exercise, activity, nutrition, even business. Making those small steps leads to a long-term big success. Hopefully you found that useful, and look forward to seeing you when I'm next up here. Cheers then, and bye for now.